Hi, in this video, I'll be showing you how to write an LEQ. I made a video about how to write a DBQ, but I'm not going to do that this time because I don't have that much time today to do a video that long. Because if you saw that video, it was like an hour and a half. Well, there's two parts, but anyways. So if you really want to know the essay writing process, it's somewhat similar for the two essays. So you might want to watch the DBQ one, but I'm going to be telling you about the LEQ. So I'm going to choose what essay question I'll do, because remember, when you get to the LEQ section, it's the last section of the exam, and they're smart enough, at least they've been done through the whole exam throwing stupid things at you, but at least they gave you three things to choose from. And the three things are different time periods. The first, or things, I should be more specific, questions. The first one is, let me try to think what the years are. 1400s, well, maybe not 1400s, but basically anything up to 1763, I believe. I'm sorry if I have this wrong, but I believe that's what it is. The second time period is 1763 to 1898, I believe. And then the last one is 1898 and after. So basically, the first one is like, will be about like colonial days, revolution days. The second one could be about Civil War, industrial things, things leading up to Civil War, territorial acquisitions. And then the last one could be about any of the world wars, Great Depression, 1920s, 1950s, any sort of reform in the 1960s, things like that. So at least you can choose. So let's see which one I have to do. Or I'm not going to do the full essay, but let's just see which one it's like about. All right, question number 4. So that's, I mean, personally, usually to me, the last one seems the most easy to me. And sometimes the middle one, in most cases, I would not choose the first one, but that's just me, because I feel like history is a little bit more easier to understand, and I remember things easier in the new days, because, think about it, like in the new days, like the 1900s, I mean, like they named things for what they did. So let me try to think of an example, like maybe the Servicemen's Readjustment Act, for example. I mean, what does that sound like? Servicemen are people that were in the war, readjustment, it helps them. See, that's what I mean. But like in the 1800s or 1700s, they would say, Supreme Court case Marbury versus Madison. What was that? Oh, see, that's what I mean. Like, I know what it was, but I'm just saying. So anyways, all right, before we get on, let's talk about the steps and the points, okay? Steps. The first step that you do is choose the question. Choose what you think you know the most about. Don't just choose something random like, I'll just choose that one. Actually think of if you actually can think of facts that could go with it, specific facts. That's how you should choose it. Then read the prompt and understand the type of prompt. The types of prompts that you can have is, the first one is compare and contrast. For example, how were the 1920s like the 1950s? Another one that you could see is cause and effect. What caused the Civil War? Oh, that would be an easy question. What were the effects of the Gilded Age? And then the last kind is considered the most difficult. They're like same diff. That's what I like to call it, same and diff. And this is like, oh, what remained the same? What changed? And let's see, which kind is this? Evaluate the extent, well, I said that I was going to go through steps, but let's still see. Evaluate the extent to which globalization fostered change. Unfortunately, that looks like a same and diff one, which is usually the hardest one because it's a usually pretty specific thing that's like, well, I didn't really learn a whole lot about that. In my opinion, out of these three, I said that usually I would choose the third. In this case, I would actually choose the second, well, it says question 3 anyways, but we're stuck with this one because that's what I said I would do. Okay, so that's the second step. All right, now, once you figure out what prompt it is and you figure out what it's asking, then you want to facts. So you don't have a planning time for LEQ. You only have 40 minutes. So let me put that up here. 40 minutes to write it. But you should spend some time kind of planning. So facts, you need to write down every single thing that you can think of that can apply to it, because that's what the LEQ is about. Think about it. No documents for this one. You got to make sure that you're saying your facts. You know how there was an outside knowledge point for the DBQ? Well, this whole thing is an outside knowledge thing. So write down every fact that you can think of. Here's what you should do. You should say, and this doesn't apply to this prompt, but I'm saying, like, for example, Taft-Hartley Act, Theodore Roosevelt's big stick diplomacy. Don't be like, oh, there was economic change in the 1930s. Sorry. I mean, you can put that, but then you're not going to score well, unfortunately. This is why the main thing that you need to do when studying for the AP exam is to know your facts. And where do you find those? Oh yeah, on this channel, I'm making 552 terms that you need to know. Watch those short videos. See if you're like, I don't remember what that is, click on it. And it says the cause and effect. You need to not just know definitions, you need to know cause and effect. Because compare and contrast still applies to cause and effect. Same in diff also. All right, so after you figure out your facts, then you're going to do lines of reasoning. And I've said before, lines of reasoning need to be SAQ style. So in a class like AP Lang, you might have a thesis that is just listing 3 things, for example. Like, people 16 and up should be able to vote because of this, this, and this. That's fine for an AP English class in most cases. But for this course, that doesn't work, unfortunately. You have to say something that, pretend like that you're answering, and let's pretend this is a SAQ. Let's pretend that when you're writing the thesis, you're writing a SAQ answer. It needs to have a specific sort of, like, it's hard to explain. Like, once I get to it, I'll explain more, and I did in the DBQ video. It's not necessarily you have to have a specific fact in the thesis, but you need to have like a specific claim, like not just economic change in terms of what, like, that's what I mean. It's not like a super specific fact, like you could, but then how could you have facts to support a specific fact? That's a little bit hard to do. So you don't need to be super specific, but specific enough. So the lines of reasoning, in case you didn't know what that is, that's the things that are in the thesis that will end up being what you talk about in the body paragraphs. So after you do the lines of reasoning, then you can start writing. Write with the following outline. And it's not as the first paragraph needs to have context, and we'll talk about what that is in a minute. Then you need to have your thesis. Then in the body paragraphs, you need to have topic sentence, or I'll just say TS, topic sentence, which is a line of reasoning. Then you need to explain. So explain, answer the question. And then evidence, use your facts. And then you need to have analysis. And this is, I know this is not, I'm not writing this the same way as I did for the DBQ, because obviously you don't have documents, you're not sourcing, but this is really the same for the DBQ. You need to answer the question, all right, explain, use your evidence, but you also, the most important part, almost every student that takes the class can do the EX and the EV. What they forget is the AN. You need to connect it to the thesis. You need to say basically, this fact supports my thesis because, you might not necessarily say it that way, but that is the most important thing, because you can have facts all you want, but let's look at the rubric, okay? So then you're gonna kind of have a conclusion, and then you'll do that 2 times. I recommend occasionally 3. We'll talk about that. You don't have, there's no point for how much you write, you just need to have enough things. So then you need to have a conclusion paragraph. I mean, you don't have to have a conclusion paragraph, but that's a good thing to do. Conclusion, and up here it's just a conclusion sentence, and here is a conclusion paragraph. And then you're going to build upon the historical thinking skill, which is compare, contrast, cause and effect, same and difference. And then you're going to kind of finish with a strong statement, sort of. So let's look at the rubric now. For the LEQ, you have 6 points that you can get. The first point that you can get is for the thesis. And the thesis must, to get this point, you must have a defendable, it must be defendable. What does defendable mean? It means that it's got to be something that you could actually argue, and that some person could argue against. So you can't just say, well, for example, for this one, evaluate the extent to which globalization fostered change. Globalization kind of fostered change, sort of. Or if you say something like that, where you're like kind of in the middle, like, no, that's not defendable. So you wouldn't get the point. But it also needs defensible. Whatever. Okay. Then it also needs to be specific with lines of reasoning. I already kind of said this. It needs to be answered in sort of an SAQ style. So cannot just be globalization did foster change a lot because of this and because of this. And if those 2 things that you say are generic, like if they're just like because of economic changes and because of political changes. No, say specific things. Because of economic changes at the middle class level or something like that. That's what I mean. It's got to be more specific than that. And it typically, you can say the line of reasoning number 1, and then that's a sentence, and then you can say furthermore, second thing. It's good to have more than 1 sentence. That's a better thesis. Okay. Like I said, it's not the same as in English. All right. And then you need context as the second point. And this has to be background information before the time period and the prompt. And I forgot to say that above. For when you're reading the prompt, look at the time period as well. That's very important. And so it's like context is basically like, well, what I'm about to talk about, it happened because of this. And that's what you start your essay with. So that's the second point. That can be a pretty simple point to get, but it has to have a specific fact that is explained. It's not just, In 1946, there was this bill. Okay, well, that's a specific fact, but what does that mean? Tell me. So that's the point. All right. A third point you can get is basic facts. How about I'll say that? Basic, specific facts. And all you need to do is include specific facts. That's all you need to do. But if you want to get the fourth point, connected facts, specific facts. So the fact the fact points that you can get 2 fact points, and it has to be the first one or connected to thesis. So the first one is you just have to include facts. You can just drop this here, and then not connect it. All right, you get one point, but you want another one? Say this supports my thesis because. Okay, then the fifth point that you can get is HTS. What is a HTS? A historical thinking skill. Remember, I said that's kind of what you should do in the conclusion paragraph. You can do it in the body paragraphs as well, but you need to discuss compare and contrast for time periods. You need to do cause and effect. And how do you know which one to do? Well, remember, that's why we need to figure out what prompt it is, so we know which one we'll use. And same in diff could be a different one. All right. And that one, that needs to also support thesis. Support the thesis. Because this changed over time, this means this, which is what your claim was. So as you can see, the thesis is one of the most important points, because if you don't have a good thesis, how can you have facts that support your thesis? So the last point is complexity. And you need to basically be some crazy historian that knows everything. There's not, basically the guidelines to get this, they say you need to have a complex understanding and like take a I don't know if this is a good analogy. Take a jar of peanut butter and a jar of jelly and make a taco out of it. That's, just think about that. Like, all right, got a peanut butter jar, got a jelly jar, I made a taco out of it. That's kind of the only way that you can get the complexity point, and only 2% of people get it. And I hate to burst your bubble, but you're probably not going to be one of those 2% people. If you were, then you probably wouldn't be watching this video. So don't be too worried about that. But if you really happen to think you understand it, you could get it. So make sure that you expand upon these historical thinking skills and take 2 things that wouldn't be considered related and make them related, but it has to be historically correct. That's basically how you get that. And you can kind of do that throughout or in the conclusion. These are the 6 points to get. Now, how many to pass? All right, well, assuming that you do average on everything else, 4 out of 6 is what you need to at least get. What is the average? 2 out of 6. So you got to be careful. All right, so that is the background information for the LEQ. All right, finally, let's actually see. I'm not going to write a LEQ, but I'm going to show you the process and what I would do. Okay. So you cannot do successful on the LEQ, especially, I mean, you can get by on the multiple choice. You're like, oh yeah, I remember that. Oh yeah, I remember that. But no one's going to have something that might trigger a memory for this, unlike any of the other sections. Like DBQ has documents. They might trigger things for you to remember. But this one, you just have to make sure you know your facts. So if you don't know anything, you really can't answer the question successfully. So make sure that you're studying. Okay, so I'm going to, let's pretend I just got this. All right, I'm reading. Okay. Let's pretend that I am very strong in the 1945 to 2000 economic topics. So I'm reading these, I'm like, transatlantic interactions, I don't really know a lot about that. All right, I'm not doing that one. New technology, well, I know that it did make change, but I can't think of specific things. All right, I'm not doing that one. Globalization, foster change in the economy. Oh, wow, I know that one. Personally, for me, question three is what I would choose. I know the most about that. And I feel like it's the simplest because, I mean, you talk a lot about industrialization as a major topic. You do not really talk about labor systems or globalization that much. But that's what I happen to get by the spinner. So I'm going to try to do this one. So, and I've said this before, I'm no expert, but this is the way to do it. And I know the way to do it. That doesn't mean I can do it perfectly. But anyways, okay, I chose the question. Pretend I know the most about that. All right, I'm reading the prompt. Okay. Evaluate the extent to which globalization fostered change in the United States economy from 1945 to 2000. Okay, the things that I can't underline on this, but if I could, I would underline evaluate the extent. That means how much. So a lot or not a lot. That is basically what the question is asking when you see evaluate the extent. And that's a common thing that there is. So the next thing that I would underline is globalization, because what are we looking at? What are we evaluating the extent of? And it's the globalization effect on the economy. You have to make sure you know what it's asking so that you don't accidentally write an essay about the wrong thing. The last thing I would underline is the time period. I cannot discuss, my specific facts cannot be outside of this, and my context must be before 1945. These are the three things that I take note of. And now I'm looking at what kind of prompt is this? This is a continuity and change. Sort of cause and effect, but more of continuity and change, which I said is same and diff. So we are saying, is it same or is it diff? That's what it's saying. Did the globalization make same or did it make diff? And let's say I'm thinking, I say diff. And the correct answer is diff. If you say same, then that's not really right. But you could argue effectively. So you could turn around that and make it correct. But in most cases, you would want to say diff if you knew, because globalization did change things a lot. So now that I've done that, that was step 1 and 2. Now facts. I'm thinking of what facts. So now that I'm saying that it changed a lot, what could I use to prove that? And I think it might be good to have at least 4 facts. At least 4. Probably at least 4. Okay. So I should have put that up there. 4 minimum. The reason why is that you would want to have probably 2 per body paragraph. To make sure that you know what you're doing, and don't overdo it. That will waste time. Okay, so I'm going to say, well, first of all, let's think about what is globalization. Well, it was the concept that a whole bunch of technology led to globalization, so countries could be connected more. And another thing that contributed to globalization was involvement in, well, I don't know the right word for it, things such as the UN, United Nations, or North Atlantic Treaty Organization, sort of alliances or peace programs. So that is actually, some were in 1945, but yeah, you probably couldn't use that as context because that's kind of pushing it at 1945. But since that's in 1945, I'm going to use United Nations, and and that's specific, and I'm going to say economic benefits, and I'm going to include the Marshall Plan, because organizations like the United Nations formulated things like the Marshall Plan. So that's sort of two facts. But then I would go for what else could I say? I could say the OPEC embargo. It didn't necessarily say positive changes in the economy. Think about it. Globalization led to the interconnectedness of America wanting oil from the Middle East, and the OPEC embargo would not have occurred without globalization. And it definitely negatively impacted the United States in the 1970s. All right, what else could I say? Let's see. Since globalization has to do with a whole bunch of different countries, so we should think of foreign things more than domestic. And if you can't think of facts, here's what you need to do. So I've been doing this for a long time, and for the time's sake of this video, I'm going to stop it here. But what you would want to do, if you couldn't think of enough facts, as you're writing, you'll probably think of another one. That's the way that people's brains work. So let's just say these are the facts that I'm going to use, okay? I have an idea of what I'm going to say. Now the lines of reasoning, I'm going to say, okay, how did globalization change affect the economy? Well, I can say globalization led to and the two things that I'll say are foreign trade relations, and that's how I'll use the OPEC embargo. And then what could I say for the Marshall Plan? I could say improvement programs, and I could even expand upon that with the Truman Doctrine or Eisenhower Doctrine. So basically, these are, and I would want to be more specific, but for time's sake, I'm not going to do that. But this is just a process that you would want to do. So these are the two lines of reasoning, and these are going to be what the two paragraphs are about. And now, then that's when I would start writing. So I would want to think of the context immediately. So what contributed to globalization? Well, right before 1945 was the World War II. So I could say something about World War II resulting in desire for peace, and then that would result in programs like the United Nations, which would lead to globalization. So this is basically the process for writing a LEQ. And if I continued to write by this, I would get I would want to think of a historical thinking skill as I went through, but assuming that I did that, I could get 5 out of 6 points at least. And if the complexity point only 2% of people get, but anyways, that is the process for writing it. So hopefully this video was helpful, and thank you for watching.